So, you know, you can hear. Likes the TV. Good morning, Tiffany.
Good morning, Michelle. How's the conference going so far?
Well, we're just getting settled in and yeah, if you want to sit and listen, and then we'll bring you on here shortly. And, you know, we're talking about all things childcare, obviously. Tiffany is joining us remotely from Interlochen Arts Academy. So she's got a nice little terrible view over there from the lake.
Absolutely.
I think we're waiting on one, but I just want to get the show on the road, as it were, because, you know, we all have things to do, places to be, babies to kids and whatnot.
Putting the overhead lights on, there's quite a bit of glare. Kim,
Blair?
from sitting on this side.
Oh, I see.
Just from
I see from the window.
I'm just gonna try on this. Oh.
Is that better?
Awesome. Well, thank you. The Benzie Area Chamber of Commerce would like to thank all of you for attending today. This is the first of many Making Benzie Better business enrichment programs. Today, we're here to discuss childcare. Your Benzie Chamber recognizes that childcare is one of the many struggles rural communities have in attracting and retaining a viable workforce. Childcare, along with workforce housing, broadband availability, business development, workforce training are vital to creating a sustainable workforce in our area. Childcare is a multifaceted issue. Parents need to find a trustworthy and reliable caregiver. Families need to seek out caregivers that are available when the family needs them most often for work. And families need to find caregivers that are affordable and work within their budget. Childcare can come in many forms, family and friend caregivers, in-home daycares, licensed childcare centers, and even after-school programming. While Benzie County has a wide array of childcare providers, we simply do not have enough providers to service our young working families. During the school year, many working families depend on in-person learning as a means of childcare during the day. Last year, many working families had one parent leave the workforce to care for young children as childcare was simply unavailable due to the increase in need and health concerns. As pandemic restrictions eased and children resumed their in-person learning, many working parents were able to rejoin the workforce. Even prior to the pandemic, local businesses struggled to retain reliable workers, especially those with young children. Pandemic restrictions amplified that issue when parents were forced to stay at home to assist with childcare and remote learning. Many businesses were forced to operate with reduced hours or close completely due to lack of staff. Our area's economy is heavily influenced by tourism, with many businesses staffing to capacity Memorial Day through Labor Day. Unfortunately, most of our local businesses were unable to hire enough staff for this summer. Many working families want to be able to re-enter the workforce full-time, but childcare continues to be a barrier. While we applaud our schools for providing activities, sports, clubs, and even programs like Seeds to help students stay engaged, we need to do more. Great organizations like Cognition and many of our local churches and other organizations have great programming that have filled in the gaps. But the need is great, especially for infant to pre-K children. There's simply not enough providers in our area. We have some great speakers here today to let you know this issue has not fallen on deaf ears. We have Woody Smith from Avenue ISR, who is part of the executive team at Traverse Bay Great Start Collaborative, here to inform you about the state of Michigan's Tri-Share childcare program. We have Tiffany McLeod-Blythe, the Associate Vice President of Human Resources at Interlochen Center for the Arts, She's joining us virtually to update us on how the TriShare program is working for one of our chamber members. And our very own Representative Jack O'Malley will be giving us an update on his initiatives in Lansing on accessible and affordable childcare. I will note that we are joined today by Stacy Bitework, the Manistee Chamber of Commerce President and current President of our Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance. We will have a short Q&A session at the end of our panelists. In case you have any questions, we'll address those then. And to kick us off, I'd like to have Woody Smith come up and start off our panel.
Well, good morning. I guess standing is maybe better. I'll project through the mask. Yes, so thank you, Michelle, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for having this session. Thank you to Cognition for hosting. Thank you to the Cherry Hut for providing lunch. Thank you to Representative O'Malley and to Tiffany for joining me on the panel, and to all of you for being here. So I'm going to tell you about the TriShare program, but I'm Woody Smith. I'm a consultant in Traverse City, but for one reason or another, I've been involved in early childhood things for about 10 or 11 years. Nice to see you again, Kimmy, because there's an ongoing conversation in our communities throughout Northwest Lower Michigan about all of the challenges that Michelle talked about in the opener. And obviously the TriShare program is just one experiment that is being tried to try to help. It's a challenging business to be in the business of childcare. It's a challenging situation for young families who are trying to afford it and find options. So the Michigan legislature approved this appropriation as a pilot program. And there was leadership from the Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce. So businesses were recognizing that, there are many reasons why it can be hard to hire employees. But one of them, a limiting factor, is when somebody wants to work, but they don't have a quality environment for their child. But then there's also affordability. And so trying to do something that would both that would create an alternative that would help employees who want to rejoin the workforce have an option to make it more affordable to get access to quality childcare. So it's a TriShare program, meaning split three ways between the employer, the family, or the parent or caregiver of the child, and then the state of Michigan. So 3 regions were chosen for the pilot. One of them is Saginaw, the Saginaw area. One of them is Muskegon in the Muskegon area, and one of them is the 5 counties of Northwest Lower Michigan. So Antrim, Benzie, Kalkaska, Grand Traverse, and Leelanau. Employers based in that 5-county area are eligible to participate, but the employees can be elsewhere. So if you're an employer in Benzie County, but some of your employees are in Manistee County, that is still okay. In fact, one of the companies that's signed an MOU and is launching the TriShare program is Cherry Republic, which has retail locations in Ann Arbor and in Frankenmuth, thank you, and Holland. And so those are all outside of our region, and Charlevoix too, 4 locations outside of our region, but mostly rural. And so Michigan Women's Commission and the Early Childhood Investment Corporation, both of whom are helping to oversee all of this, have said that's okay because the headquarters is here. So this information sheet has kind of some more specifics. The program, because of the appropriation, is designed for families that are making between 150% and 250% of the federal poverty limit. So that's going to vary based on family size. If it's a family with 2 people, a single parent and a child, the allowable income is going to be lower. If it's a larger family, it's going to be higher, and that's on the second page. The specific guidelines. So, some programs, are very, very exacting in terms of all of the different income categories that we're looking at. But in this case, we're trying to keep it pretty simple so that employees, who are interested don't have to jump through too many hoops to be able to participate. So we're really measuring it based on the salary that the employee has from their employer, the one that's participating, as well as if they have a spouse or partner that's helping to raise the children in the home, then that person on a self-reported basis would report their income, and that's what goes into the qualification. So if somebody gets approved through the program, employer says yes, they sign an MOU, employee goes to 5to1.org, which is the site, and all of this is in this information sheet. They sign up, they put some basic information, then they are in the program. If they have a childcare provider already, then that childcare provider will be contacted by United Way of Northwest Michigan, who's acting as the fiduciary, and say, most of the childcare providers already know that this is, an option, but they'd be contacted and say, would you like to participate? We have no reason to think anybody will say no. And then, that will be the childcare provider. If the employee does not have childcare and they're looking for an option, a representative from the Great Start to Quality, which kind of provides the quality ratings and the help with licensure for childcare providers, is going to help that person try to find childcare that meets their needs. There's no guarantee, but the idea that there's going to be a live person who's an expert at the system who's going to be trying to provide some assistance with them in finding a placement is really attractive to a lot of the employers that we've talked to. So that's the basics of how the program is going to work. It's a pilot program. Right now, it's going to be going through the end of July 2022. So we've got 11 months or so. Representative O'Malley asked me how it's going. I would say it's going well, but it's going more slowly than we were hoping. This is a big change for an employer to be considering offering a new benefit to their employees, figuring out what the implications are. So we do have 4 signed MOUs, one with Interlochen Center for the Arts, one with Charter Republic. Munson Childcare is participating because some of their employees of that organization are qualified for this program based on their income. And then the 4th one is Century Inc., which is a manufacturer based in Traverse City. Another manufacturer, Skilled Manufacturing, is interested, but they're going to sign the MOU once they've identified an employee that's a good fit. And we've got a couple more who have indicated a strong willingness. But I would still say that many people don't yet know about this program. We have plenty of capacity. So we're on the verge of having about 5 employees get started. I think our region can handle upward of 100. So we've got a lot of room left. If this is something that seems like it might be a good fit for your business, I would love to talk to you. I'd love to answer your questions. I'd love to see if this is going to be a good fit for you, and see if this is something that we can get some Benzie County employers involved in and spread the word. This can be a good fit for large businesses. It could be a good fit for small businesses. It can be for-profit companies. It could be for not-for-profit organizations. Really, all you have to do is be an employer with employees that you think might have a need for childcare. Although the program was intended and had young children in mind, so we're talking preschool age 0 to 5, it actually can cover any children. So children, up to 17 years old. I don't imagine that we're going to have a whole lot of teenagers, but we theoretically could. And it's for sort of classic childcare, but it can be for before school care, after school care, summertime programs. So those things would all qualify, even though really the core intent is, typically for families with young kids, who are struggling to pay for childcare and need some help in finding an option that meets the family's needs. So I don't know where we are in time. I can keep babbling on about different things, but that's the gist of what this program is. So I think that maybe we kind of get through, and Tiffany can share her perspective of why this is something that was interesting for Interlochen Center for the Arts, and Jack can tell us more about how this fits with the overall initiatives going on in the legislature as they think about the complex needs and opportunities in childcare. So thanks.
Thanks. All right, and we're gonna have Tiffany. Are you gonna put your camera on, Tiffany? There you go. Tiffany's joining us from Interlochen, and how's this program working for you?
I think this program is working well. We just rolled it out because we're about to start our new academy year. So we didn't roll it out this summer because we had summer camp. And as you may be aware, we get a lot of new employees that come in during the summertime, and it's very short-lived. So we just started to roll out this program. It's my understanding that we've had a couple of people already express interest and has already reached out to Woody's team, as well as we've been getting a lot of internal questions as well related to the program. How does it really work before people apply? So we are really excited about this. Part of the reason why we decided to participate is a couple-fold. The two biggest priorities I have as an HR leader, especially in terms of recruitment, is housing and childcare. These have been ongoing barriers that we constantly see with getting people able to work at our organization. So we've been pretty committed to try to figure out different ways and avenues in order to be able to support our employees, because we want them to thrive.
Perfect, that's wonderful. And do keep us updated on, as you get more employees signed up for this program, keep the chamber in the loop so we can, let everybody know how well it's working for you.
Absolutely. I think this is a great initiative to help make it more affordable for individuals, so that childcare isn't a barrier for why they're unable to go to work.
Exactly. Thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate your time. And now we will bring up Jack, our representative, O'Malley from Lansing. Just Jack. And he's got all kinds of good stuff going on in Lansing. He's gonna shake down the Treasury Department.
Well, let me just kind of tell you how I got into this. 4 years ago now, I was running for office, and I was knocking doors, and I said at the time, I don't have an agenda. I don't know. I just want to help. And when I'd ask people, what's number one, what's the most important thing to you? It was either fix the roads, it was auto insurance, and this third issue kept popping up, childcare. By the way, I have to congratulate Kimmy. Years ago, when I was still doing television, I was at across down the street downtown, and I remember you were, I want that building, and Five Shores got it. The sons of guns. And when I saw it, I thought, curses on them. But you're here, and it's beautiful. So congratulations. So it's childcare, and I'm like, what? My daughters are in their 30s. It had been forever, and childcare wasn't easy 30 years ago, but it was there. So I started asking questions, and I started doing roundtables in the district. I remember one snowy day at Crystal Mountain. We had people around the table, and providers and folks came in, and they were telling me the issues. And what I'm going to tell you here today, I am impugning no one. I am not picking on anybody, because I know everybody's intentions are good. But I sat in on one of my first meetings on the TriShare program, which I think is a fantastic program. I think that's a smart part of it. But when I was bringing up some of the issues that I had heard, I even had Ken Sickenline. Some of you may remember, he was a longtime representative, senator, speaker of the House. He was involved, and he was working with private sector consultants who was helping the Graham Shriver's Chamber. And he went back to his office and he said, I was in this meeting and O'Malley kept talking about regulations. Is that really a problem? Because everybody assumes it's price, right? It's are regulations a problem? And his childcare person said, hell yes. And that is, I think, one of the problems that childcare has faced over the years, from a third party, don't have a dog in the fight observance. And that is, and again, I'm just giving you my overall impression. This is not a knock on anybody, because I know everybody's intentions are good. But we have gotten so caught up in keeping our kids safe that we are making it so safe that nobody can be in the business. And now the kids are down the street at Aunt Jenny's or Old Lady Smith, and nobody's overseeing those daycares, those babysitters. And so we've created this system. This is all before COVID. COVID's a problem, but this was here before COVID. COVID just brought it to light. So that's a good thing about COVID. But we have built up this system where everybody wants the kids safe. And my answer is, you're right. Nobody wants kids juggling knives. But there has to be a point where it gets so prohibitive that nobody can be in the business. The other issue that I believe, all well-intentioned, but we have to do something about it, and I think we are, and I'll tell you about our bills here in a second, is we've so focused on, we've got to make sure our kids are learning and that they're prepared and that they're ready. Well, sometimes mom and dad need somebody to watch their kid and make sure that they're safe and they're getting fed and they're in a good situation. And so I believe, have pushed statewide to daycare centers, which are fine, unless you live in Beulah, right? How many kids are in Beulah? Enough to have a full-blown center? Probably not. We're hearing out of Manistee, the people at the Little River Band, that they're having problems. And they run a casino, you know? So we've got to do things that can make this better for rural Michigan. And rural Michigan primarily is in-home daycare. And so that's become my real focus. I want to help all daycare, but I want to help in-home daycare specifically, because that's the backbone of rural Michigan. Now, here's a guy from Northern Michigan who just said what I said. And I had some people from Detroit said, Jack, the city of Detroit needs in-home daycare too. So this isn't just a rural issue. This is a statewide issue. Centers make sense, but they cannot be the backbone of childcare. It has to be the in-home daycare, because in so many places, that's where we're at. That's the community we're in. So let's not fight against what's there because we want something else. We have to say, you know, we want our kids to be in quality daycare. And so we have to look at the in-home stuff. So I think one of the things, my colleague, Greg Van Workum, was one of the driving forces on the Tri-Share program. And I think it makes a ton of sense, because as we look to make this affordable and make sure that I always use the name Susie Smith. Susie Smith is our in-home daycare provider, or anybody can get paid. And I think that the Tri-Share program makes a lot of sense. Now, you know, like dental and vision, can a company maybe make daycare, childcare, one of those options for an employee for the years that they need them? It's not something that they might need for 10 or 15 years, but for 5 or 6, it might be. So I think that's a great idea. So when we got into this work group, now we had 3 bills proposed last year, and oh my gosh, we fought them tooth and nail. And part of it was the establishment that is the childcare world was fighting because of those regulations. And I learned a lot. I learned some things not to say in a group. But we regathered at the beginning of this term, and I don't know how many of you may know her name. Michelle Richard is a person who is very big in the childcare world, and Governor Whitmer brought her on as kind of her childcare guru. And Michelle and I had a couple of early testy, you know, who are you and how are you going to do? Well, I trust her completely. She is a great person to work with, and we've had our fights, not disagreements is probably a better word. But what we've done is we've come up with a package of 8 pieces of legislation. We also have administrative rules. That was one of the things initially when we were talking about this. It was, well, everything can be done. The governor can do it all. She can change these rules administratively. And I said, yeah, but an administrative rule can get changed. We want things in statute, so yeah, they can get changed too. But so that it's more difficult. It's a harder thing to change a law than it is an administrative rule. New administration, boom, things change. So we've got our statutes that we're looking at. There are some administrative changes that Governor Whitmer has said she will do. And then there's the budgetary discussion of COVID money. There's a lot of COVID money sitting out there. And those discussions are still being discussed. Hopefully here we'll have answers and everything laid out by September 30th, if not sooner. So I'll start there, because what we're doing is, hopefully it gets accepted, that we increase the above poverty ratio to 200% while we have the COVID money. And we get more money to our providers. That's one of the things too that when people talk about, well, we've got to help our families, we've got to help our families. I don't want to seem like the downer here, but you're right. How we help our families is by helping our providers, because we don't have any. So when we can build up our providers, now we can help our families. It's kind of like throw the life, raft to somebody, or the life ring to somebody. Don't wade in if you can't swim. So what we'd be doing is some changes there. And most of these are just for the length of the COVID dollars, which would be 2 to 3 years. And the hope is that that will help jumpstart our childcare providers. Hope that some of the folks that got out of it will get back into it. Some people will come new to it. And what I really hope we can do is change from paying for attendance to pay for enrollment, much like our schools. Because maybe the Smith family has a child there, but something happens and they're out for a week to 10 days. Well, the provider doesn't get paid for those days. Well, that's not right. The provider has to hold that slot, right? They can't just throw somebody else in. So this would say, hey, for this term, if you've got X amount of kids, we're going to pay you for those kids, whether they're there or not. Now, if somebody's never there, I'm sure there will be ways to get around that. But that will give support to our providers. They know they're going to be getting a certain amount of money in for a certain period of time. And there will be less, oh my gosh, they're not here. What do I do? I'm not getting that paycheck this week. So those are some of the budgetary things. But here are the 8 bills. If you want to know numbers, I can get them for you, but I was never much good at math, so I can't remember numbers. There is a bill John Roth from the 104th has that was started by the Chamber Alliance, and that would have co-location, because there are some strip malls and there are some things like that where there is an empty building that would be a perfect place for a child center to go into, or a child care situation, but because it's too close to a questionable business, maybe a tavern or something like that, that the state says, no, that's not a good place. Well, we're saying, what if we can actually bring the child care to a little closer to where people work, and maybe that questionable tavern is, because they sell liquor, not because there's bar fights every Friday night, is, down at that end of the strip mall, and we can have the child care center here. So that's just one of those regulations that when somebody put it in there made sense, but now it's like, hey, let's take a look at this. So the co-location, I know it is very big, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but childcare is also obviously a job and work-related issue, because, is where you look at our situation now, people say, where's our workforce? There's a shortage. Yeah, maybe it's the $300, maybe it's COVID, maybe it's they don't have childcare. All of these, there's no one factor, but childcare, lack of childcare is huge, especially in Beulah, where there is no childcare, or very little. The next bill, some of these are just kind of straightforward. One would allow safety records and that sort of thing to be online. So it doesn't have to be a hard cover book. Parents can access it online so they can see what's going on in any individual child care facility, home, or center. Another would, on the other side of things, Michigan had a law that basically said anything that ever happened in your child care center had to be posted online so mom and dad could go look. Well, there were things on there maybe for 10 years. And it would say Jack's Daycare was investigated for this, but that's all it would say. So what we're doing is we're going to go into the federal regulations that say things only have to be up for 3 years. And we are going to add a stipulation that says Jack's Daycare was investigated, no charges, nothing was found. So because up to this point, it just said there was an investigation. I don't understand if there was an investigation. Well, what happens if it was just a parent or family harassing? Because that happens too, unfortunately. So the bill would help both parents. Those 2 bills would help both parents and providers. Simple rule that actually this is the one rule change that nobody has a problem with. It would grant a 90-day grace period for a child care provider, specifically in-home, to enact any new rule or regulation. Because again, in-home provider working 6 A to 6 P, Monday through Friday. When do they have time to go get whatever's needed or handle this or fill out the paperwork? So we're giving them a 90-day grace period, and everybody agreed with that one. This is one that I didn't even know existed, but it made sense. There's a bill that will hopefully crack down on bad actors. In some of the centers, what would happen is I'd have a center and it had all kinds of problems, issues, and the state pulled the license. Well, then I would just go open another center under a different name, and I'm still in charge. This bill will say that everybody who's in charge, who owns that, who's in charge of that facility, their names have to be listed so that I can't just go and reopen, Jack's Daycare now to, Fluffy Foot Daycare or something, and I'm still the crumb bum running it. So this is a way for the state to track who actually has been fined or written up, and now they can control it a little better. There's been some instances of that. The three bills that are set to help increase supply is my bill, which tends to be the most controversial of our 8-bill package. And this is one that I'll just tell you about what we're dealing with here. My bill says that in the state of Michigan, currently it is 1 provider to 6 kids. My bill says it can go from 1 child to 7, an increase of 1 child. The reason I introduced that bill was because I heard from providers in my district and elsewhere. If I could have just 1 more kid, I could make enough money to keep my nose afloat. There's a problem with that, because remember, rules and regulations blind people. We want our kids safe. That's not right. That's not good. Well, there are 23 other states that have greater ratios than ours. And we had another bill last term that we did away with that would have allowed a 2-child increase. Now, this is all toddler up, not infant and toddler, because there's different ratios for that. This would be, third grade, 3, 4-year-olds. It would have allowed an increase of 2 kids before and after school to help with the daycare. Or latchkey kind of a situation. Mom and dad, a little older, you could let them in. One of the issues that Laura had, and I'm probably picking on them a little bit, but it's an easy pick, so I will. The reason they didn't like that bill was that the septic systems could be overrun. And I call that the Cousin Eddie defense. If anybody remembers Christmas Vacation, you remember Cousin Eddie. To get a license to be a child care facility, you have to prove that your septic system works. That's part of the getting it. Now, if at any point your septic system gets full, you get it pumped. But that was one of the reasons they didn't like it. But to make things easier and to show a sign of good faith, I said, all right, we'll worry about that another day. So my bill would allow the increase of 1 child. I'm still getting pushback on that because they just don't think that that's right, that the person might not be able to handle the child and that extra person, that extra kid. And what our bill says is you have to be in business for 22 or 29 months before you can even go to 7. And you don't have to go to 7, only if you want to go to 7. And if Laura is watching you and for any reason go against any of the rules, things can get changed, but we're not supposed to move here. And this is an area, and I don't mean, I want you to understand what we're dealing with, at least as I see it. One of the reasons we're at a situation we're at, now remember, I'm thinking in-home primarily. One of the reasons where we're at is because of Great Start to Readiness. Now, I am not knocking Great Start to Readiness, but those are 4-year-olds. And to the average in-home childcare, the 4-year-old was the money kid, right? They were a little older, they were a little easier to take care of. They weren't infants, they weren't toddlers. But the state took a lot of 4-year-olds out of the system. I've heard it from providers. And that's why we want one more to help those providers, because that's who we need. Now, I know there's fundamental arguments here or there. I'm just telling you, so you know where we're at and what we're discussing. But that, I hear it from providers all the time. So I throw that out there. That's my bill. Then there's another bill, two other bills. One,
Whatever you do with the research readiness program is. So it's the program for 4-year-olds. It's free to parents. So it's not free. It's obviously people, but it's free to parents. And it was expanded under the Snyder administration and allowed for more kids.
yeah, and it's a good program, but we're talking about why daycare is where it's at today. Childcare is where it's at today. And I hear from a lot of people that we need more kids. We need to be able to get more product, if you will, just from a business standpoint. You've got to remember, our childcare providers, especially those in-home, they are micro businesses. They are small business. They are the backbone of the small business world, right? That's what they're doing, but they're doing it out of their home. We have two other bills. One would create, there are 10 counties in the state that have no infant or toddler care. So Rep. Curie's bill would create a network of, in those 10 counties where if Amy, we'd go to Amy and say, Amy, if you start an infant and toddler care, we will pay you to do it. We'll get you into the business. So that money would be used to go to those 10 counties specifically, or wherever else, primarily those 10, and then wherever else there was an infant and toddler desert, we would basically hire people, get them into the business, hopefully get them started with this money, keep them going, and then they can build their business up. But we do have that shortage. And then this one, you know, I like my bill, but this one might be the next best after mine, is it will create a network of liaisons to help our small child care people navigate the system. Because remember, it's Lara, DHHS, and Department of Education, and the three departments that our child care providers have to deal with. Now, again, picture my Susie Smith trying to run her in-home daycare center, and then she's got to call up DHHS. She's got to call up Lara. I have a hard time getting a hold of those people. So this would create a regional set of liaisons, at least for the short term, again, to jumpstart the industry, get people back into it. Hopefully, if it continues to work, we can then, appropriate monies to keep it going. But it would be there to help outside of LAR, outside of DHHS, outside of the Department of Education, to help our providers to navigate the system. So those are the main things. The administrative changes, real quick, I'll go through some of them. Improve the 5-star rating system to make it more equitable. There's real discussion about you can work to get to the 5-star, but you don't make any more money after star 3, but you have to pay a whole lot more money just to get up to 4 and 5. So how can that get changed? I've heard that, we've heard a lot of complaints about that. So hopefully they can do that. Also, administrative change to allow more curriculum vendors. So right now there's only one. Well, other people can provide curriculum as long as it meets the basic criteria, but maybe you can get it at a different cost. So that would be helpful. Allow for flexibility for substitute program directors without provisional licenses. There was another thought is, can we somehow, instead of having to be 100% taking care of all your everything on day one, can there be a period of getting you started working towards all your rules and regulations, the paperwork and things like that? Again, the idea is just to get people back in the business. Coaching and support to first-year operation, again, with liaisons. And online training for providers. We could set something up like that so that they can go and get more information online. So one of the things that I will say is, because whenever we have this conversation, a lot of people will come forward and say, yes, but now how about this? One of the things I stress is these 8 bills, these administrative changes are not the end all. This is just the beginning. There has really been very little movement on childcare over the last however many years. These bills are just the beginning. A couple of things that I've heard already is from schools. Well, oh, that's right. For Jack's summer camp, but if I could get some of these kids who would need subsidies, that I could take them in, and now we've got some childcare, daycare for the summer months too, where maybe now they're being forgotten because the rules just aren't catching up with where we're at in life. So there's a lot to do and a lot to get done, and I know there's many well-intentioned people, but unfortunately, sometimes I think government can just build on itself, and sometimes it needs to get the heck out of the way. And I think this is one of those cases where we can do things, kids aren't juggling with knives, and we can lower regulation, and we can get our in-home daycare primarily, center-based too, back in the game. So it's an exciting time. Hopefully these bills, I thought we were gonna have committee session this summer where we could take testimony. That'll probably happen the very first part of September. The governor is behind these bills. The Senate so far has told me that they don't have any real issues with the bills, but we'll see. With that said, though, I think we hopefully can get this done sooner rather than later and get governor's signatures and get all of this stuff going. Hopefully the budget process gets worked out here in the next couple of weeks. Because again, even with the COVID money, I think everybody is okay with the idea of how to spend, because it's like $1.4 billion for childcare. It's a lot of money. And I think everybody, Senate, House, and administration are all in the same ballpark as to how that money should get spent. So it'll be just, how much goes here, how much goes there, because they have to spend it, and I guess you don't send it back, but nobody want to do that. So I'm hopeful that we're finally making some progress and we can get things going, and then there's just more down the road. So that's what we got. And I can talk forever, so I'll shush. Oh. Thank you.
Well, I will open the floor up for our panelists, if anybody has any questions or inquiries, or we can give you out, give them your emails as well.
Sure. Yeah.
That quiet lunch. Yes, Steve.
So I like this, try that. For a seasonal position, is that something that could potentially qualify?
Yes. Seasonal part-time can potentially qualify. Sure. And I mean, I think it's also on the sheet. This sort of income verification is only going to happen once. So it's a question you didn't ask that some people are asking. What happens if the employee gets a raise? We're only going to be assessing this one time, so that you would need to constantly recalibrate based on.
Jessica Carlin from Benzie Bus. I'm a parent of 2 young children, and also have employees that need assistance with childcare. So I appreciate the information about childcare. Something else to not forget is some of these low-income families also have the need for transportation assistance to get their children and then to go on to their jobs once they're able to do so for that program. So that's great. Thank you for your points on demand, because as the parent, that's the issue that I've had to deal with most of the time. I currently have an 11-year-old today watching my 7 and 4-year-old, so that's a little nerve-wracking. I'm assuming they're watching a lot of television, but that's not really what you want as a parent. But it'd be nice to see more after-school programming, and then I call it the shoulder weeks between the end of the school year and the start of summer day programs. And then again, before the school year starts. So they go to summer camp at Frankfurt Elementary, but there's 4 weeks where we have to figure out what to do. So that's really hard. So I wanted to point that out too.
I think, Michelle, you mentioned seeds before. Is that program that's not available to you?
Not at Frankfurt.
Okay.
Benzie does a great job, and I work closely with that program to get their students home after school.
Right.
It's not at Frankfurt.
The seeds also have a gap.
They do, yeah. Yeah, they have a couple of weeks as well. Yeah. So a thought I had earlier as well was I don't know if there's ways to give funding to organizations like Cognition, or we've got a woman who does a nature explorers camp in Beulah, which is amazing, but they take the same 2 weeks off, and I'm not sure why, but maybe it's funding and staffing and things like that. So it would be nice to have some help for programs to run all summer.
You mentioned too, the wage and not having to reapply. There's been talk, nothing in any of the bills we have, but to do more of a stair step so that if you do get a raise, because we've had, situations where somebody doesn't take a promotion because that would knock down funding. So why not say, yeah, take the promotion and yeah, maybe you'll lose a couple of dollars in supplemental money, but let's help you move forward. So that is, I know on the childcare front specifically, that's a discussion that's been had too.
I've got a question for Jack. So, one of the things I hear from providers is that the current federal subsidy or the subsidy for 150%, it's meant to help families, but it's, it's just a pain for providers to have to go through the process. So is there some thought as you think of expanding to 200% of making the process for providers easier getting that subsidy?
So I have, on that particular front, I have just followed the administration's lead and request. So I'll ask some questions about and that's kind of a federal thing.
Yeah.
So we have to do it, but yeah, I'll ask because I'm not aware of but it's government, so I'm sure it is a thing.
I was just gonna say, I appreciate that you're working really hard on the early childhood stuff and the in-home providers. It's really important, especially in Benzie County, there's very few providers. My concern, and I think that some of the reason why we've gone to center is because we can't find people willing to do it. It's a lot of upfront costs, and I don't know if there's any grants or anything like that that are out there to support them. But my other thought is, if we can't get people to step up, this year, Benzie had a Strong Beginnings program, which allows us to take 3-year-olds. Is there any talk or word on that expanding and growing?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
In a crazy sort of way, as much as I want to push for the in-home, because I understand it, as our numbers of children shrink, schools tend kind of sort of, you got a building, maybe that's where we should be focusing our efforts down the road to make sure that those are being utilized year round with childcare. And what was your first question? Grants.
Yeah.
There have been grants in the past. As I understand it, there isn't much now, but that is under discussion too, is how can we help with, $1,000 or $1,500 grant so that it can upgrade whatever. One of my favorite stories, and in childcare, you understand it, but I was chatting with childcare providers, and they can get written up for some of the craziest stuff. Well, my favorite story is, and I don't mean this in a good way, a provider got written up because she did not have a exit sign over her bedroom window, which was on the 2nd floor, and she had nothing but toddlers and they can't read. But she had to have the exit sign. No ifs, ands, or buts. Well, that's an expense. It's just foolish.
I heard a story similar to that. Somebody said, we have to post a no smoking sign in a facility where obviously nobody's smoking, nobody would ever smoke. Anyway, just like lots and lots of boxes to check.
Yeah. And the consultants, so the other issue that I've heard, and again, is the system was better when it was under DHHS. But when it went to Lara, that's when things really started to change. And what I've gotten out of that is Lara's job is to make the rules. And they're really good at it. And so when they move into something, they're going, well, how can we change? What can we do? And so, that was a Snyder thing. We moved it into Lara. I'd like to see, I've heard from people, so I follow what I'm told. I'd like to see it move back to DHHS because they're a little more understanding, forgiving in how things roll. But that's, again, down the road.
And by the way, that's somebody's fault. That was what I said.
Yeah.
But I've got 2 quick follow-ups on that. So I think the Strong Beginnings is a multi-year grant. So I
It's 2 years,
Just 2
yes,
years.
but it's a pilot. So
Yeah.
that's why I was wondering if there
Yeah,
was
right.
any feedback on making it an actual
Strong
sustainable.
beginnings.
Strong beginnings. It's basically GSRP for 3-year-olds.
Gotcha.
The other thing is, in Leelanau County, the Leelanau Children's Center is trying to do a thing where they will help home-based providers, specifically who are going to focus on infants and toddlers, to get set up to help do kind of navigate, like Jack was talking about doing at the statewide level, help people kind of get up and running on it, which I think is a really interesting model for how, existing centers create some additional capacity. I don't know how well that's going. I'm trying to get a couple, I think 2 new folks set up in Leelanau County, but that might be an interesting model because the state's going to do what it can, but sometimes communities have to kind of solve some of these things too.
So I think we'll just want to try this as a program director for one of the few centers in Benzie, in Frankfurt, First Steps. And First Steps is kind of new, but I've been doing it for a long time, for many, many years. So we have a center, Infant Toddler Center, and a lot of our 3 and 4-year-olds have gone to the schools, which great program, they should move on. But how do I make an infant toddler center sustainable? Our ratio is 1 to 4. So 4 tuitions have to cover staff costs, our costs. And it's like, do we provide gap care? How do I staff for gap care? I would love to provide some gap care or before and after care, like higher ratios, more money. How would I get an employee to do that? That's just some of the things that I think about. Staffing has been the hardest part, especially when you're in the pandemic. I don't know if this for everybody, but how do you get quality staff? How do you pay quality staff? How do you make it affordable for families? I don't have the answers, and I've been doing it for a long time.
Do you want to handle that? Give the answers?
Because that's, and again, that comes down to, as I see it, I don't have an answer. But this is, you've got, somewhere along the line, we're gonna have to fish or cut bait. Somewhere along the line, we're gonna have to say, this is the way we wanna go, because, even, and I'm thinking of rural. Again, maybe, in-home daycare is right now, I think, is a way to go, but like you say, it's one person, they're in their house. Do we need to make it a little bigger so it's a little more sustainable? I'm not opposed to that. And is it in the schools? Is it in the center? Do we focus our efforts on that? I don't know. That's probably for, I think right now our goal is to get just the whole industry back, because as a whole, even the centers are hurt.
Yeah, because like all the things you talked about are really important. They need to happen and I'm on board, but none of them talk about how I'm gonna make my center sustainable.
Well, I mean, thank you for even trying and trying to make it work.
So hopefully, with the center, if we are doing something where you're being paid for enrollment, not attendance, that will help you, those kinds of things. The 5-star changes, if they can do that, maybe we can lower, I don't know, I'll leave it up to the governor, but if you're striving to get to a 4 or 5
Yeah, because
star.
I'm not, we're new and I haven't done my stars yet. I mean, it's
But-
been more than
but-
6 months, but I don't have 5-star staff because I'm hiring anyone
Sure.
who I can get.
But the problem is 5, if you could be a 3-star and kill it, but because the system says 4 and 5, someone might look and say, well, what's wrong with your center? You're only 3-star. My own opinion is,
I'm open.
my opinion is 5 stars kind of crazy. How about 1, 2, or 3? And let's be realistic in the real world, because you can spend all kinds of money to get to a 5-star, but it's not going to bring you in any more money. And so it doesn't help you at all. Just go down there for it.
The other challenge, I've worked with Becca a long time. The other challenge is with hospital employees is, we're 24/7. And what happens when you have one key employee that needs care?
on the afternoon shift, or one key employee that needs weekend care, or two that need midnight care, and there's just no way to make that sustainable and to stay open.
I'm trying to keep the center open with our staff, and we're already open 55 hours a week.
I forgot probably what I think is the most important thing to have in childcare. And that is, her name's Bridget Vanderhoof. Works out of Grand Rapids. She owns centers in southern Michigan and other states. We were chatting, and she has started, she's incorporated, she's done it all, a child care association initiative, so that providers can have a voice in Lansing. Because, you know, the term lobbyist, people look at it as dirty, actually lobbyists are good people. They work with associations, and they're there in the halls discussing issues. Everybody has a lobbyist. The Catholic Church has a lobbyist, the Snowmobile Association has a lobbyist. Everybody has a lobbyist. There's nothing wrong with it. And childcare for too long has been these little camps. And Bridget is going to try and bring everybody together so that you can speak with a voice. And I think that it might seem inconsequential right now, but if you can get this off the ground and get people to apply and join, I think it would be massively important for the child care industry, because then somebody will be there arguing as opposed to different groups.
Jack, I've got a couple like thought processes just going on, and one of them is we're lacking staff. And so where do you target that? I know like the Career Tech Center has an early childhood education program, but of course these are, you know, high schoolers, so they're not gonna start a center right away. They might be center staff, but they're not gonna have an in-home center. And I think back like a lifetime ago when I was expecting kiddo number 2, I was like, oh, I could watch other people's kids while I'm at home. And MSU had a program, and it was really encouraging. It was training for how to run the care, but then you're like given a book of here's your regulations to start your in-home center. Baby number 2 was born, I'm like, I'm not dealing with that. But like, who would be the target workforce for starting in-home centers again? And then how do we communicate to them that this is a viable career and they're going to be helped? You know, I'm thinking that maybe it's young parents who have one toddler at home and need an income source, or maybe it's parents who their last kid just entered kindergarten and they've been living the child language for a while. And so how do we get to them? I love the idea of the liaison walking them through the legal and that licensing process. But why would they want to? You know, how do we rebrand it almost like trade school? Like this is a needed career. This is gonna help the world as we, you know, rear children together. And so I don't know the answer, but I'm saying, like, I feel like that would help.
But, you know, and just again, to the in-home primarily, the average person who does this, again, it's a micro business.
Right.
It's a business.
Right.
And these are people who are primarily loving, caring, nurturing people.
Right.
And they've got to go through this whole monolithic procedure. You know, I know what you mean. When I was in committee hearing a year ago, I held up that book. I mean, and it's like this big and that fat, and that doesn't even include the stuff that's online.
Right.
It's an amazing amount of rules and regulations. Reasons for that, yeah, but it's a lot. And, you know, again, I'm not an expert on every angle, but even for a center, as I understand it, to get some of these extra ratings and things, well, your staff has to have a certain amount of training. Okay, I get that. But on one hand, can't the person in charge be the one with all the training, and then they have people who are working for them? That will reduce costs a little bit. We don't want that because we want everybody to have a certain amount of level of proficiency so that they're giving better care to the, well, chicken and the egg here, where are we at? How do we make this work? I don't have the answers per se, but that's where we're working. We gotta figure this out.
Is there any thought to entice people into going to work for centers by forgiving some of their education costs? The education costs for a teacher at a center is really, it's pretty incredible for what they make when they come to work at a center. Is there any?
Programs
Are there?
to help staff get educated. Yes.
And there's even been an issue where you've got to pay upfront costs for
But then you still have to take-
fingerprinting and all that stuff
Yes.
too, and then they're only there a couple of weeks, now you're not on. And so there's issues there. And you're not wrong, but we've got shortages everywhere, just teachers, nurses, rural doctors. And, you know, do we forgive everybody's education costs? I'm not saying this, we can't, but at what cost does that cost? What's the arguments?
So this is probably a stupid question.
No such thing.
I'm in the legislature, I've heard.
I'm going back to when I worked in Gaylord, and one of our department secretary took a year or two off, and she, because of her own children's age, and was a caregiver for her boss's 2 kids. Now, you can't just do that. That kind of arrangement has to be legislated, is that what I'm hearing?
No, from what you presented to me, it sounds like that was just under the table. She watched his kids. That's happening now. But that's my point, is part of the problem is we've created so many rules to keep kids safe that we've put businesses out of business. So now these kids are going to old lady Smith down the street who is smoking cigarettes and they're watching
Joints.
or whatever. But now here's another thing. I'll tell this story. There's a young gentleman who is a lobbyist from this area. And he's very big into the childcare issue. And I said, you know, you're the same age as my daughter. They went to school together. I said, I remember when my daughters were in daycare and they went to a house and Julie took care of them. And they did some games and some arts and crafts and they ate. They watched a little bit of, you know, Sesame Street or whatever, and they went out and played. I have 2 very successful daughters. And I said, Ken, you turned out all right. And he laughed and he said, yeah, and Mrs. Whatever, she used to go to the breezeway, sneak a cigarette. The point is, they turned out okay. We have to be realistic of what we're asking of people. We don't want them juggling knives, but are we gonna have this sterile hospital, whatever? It ain't gonna happen if we're talking about in-home and those kinds of things. Let's be realistic about what we're looking for.
I just want to throw this in, the mentioning of liaisons to help people get through this. You know, I've been a longtime supporter of the Disabled American Veterans Organization because there are so many barriers to vets for getting the help and the assistance. I mean, it so all speaks to overregulation, big government, and there's no shortage, it doesn't appear, to the LARA people out there to oversee all this. So, you know, it's an unbalance. And I appreciate that you're looking at the you know, at least trying to approach reestablishing a normal balance.
You know, I think we'll be successful. This COVID money is ridiculous. So it can help hopefully jumpstart. You know, there's no way the state of Michigan can keep the amount of spending that's gonna happen in the next 2 to 3 years there. I mean, we've got $1 billion just for this. There's no way we can keep that going unless something else happens. So what we've talked about with the above poverty ratio, right now it's at 150. If we can bump it up to 200% for a couple of years to help, again, jumpstart, get things going again, because we're on life support, then can we back it down to maybe a 160 or maybe a 170? Because that is a lot of money that we're paying out. So hopefully there's a way to bring it back down to a reasonable way to help those parents. But as you say, there's a lot of hoops to jump through just to do that.
Well, what if some of that money could be spent like in an enticing training program to get more staff, maybe some stipends to hire staff and offer incentives. And then also, I was a parent that did a lot of the, I call it like hodgepodge care, trade a friend, like you watch my kids on Tuesday, I'll watch your kids on Wednesday, and piecemeal my part-time childcare together for 4 kids, and was really lucky that I have a good community and network of friends that we could do that together. But offering some training and connection points, maybe through our libraries, through places like Benzie or Cognition, where we could offer a free class, come meet some other parents, we'll give you some skills and help you do this. So it's not quite as sketchy as,
The problem is you can train them, then you gotta pay them. And how much can the average parent, family pay for that childcare
Right.
for that kid? Now, if the government is subsidizing, okay, but again, how much can the government subsidize? And as the numbers here, don't quote me, but I think they're in the ballpark. I saw last year, there were 37,000 kids in the state of Michigan that were on these subsidies. That's, how many childcare age kids are there in the state of Michigan? 500,000, 1 million, whatever. Point being is, there's more kids not on those subsidies. They are moms and dads who are making it, but are paying the bills without going on the subsidy. So we can train them, but then can you pay them? Because we can only charge mom and dad so much. What's an infant? I've heard between 12 and 15 grand a year.
We just raised our rates to $50 a day.
So what's that work out to do?
Pay whether you're there or not. So, pay all the time.
I think that, tell me if I get this wrong. I think Kimmy's point is, we care about quality, right? We understand that, first 5 years of life, you're making more neural connections than you do at any other point. It's critical. We want kids to have an opportunity to be stimulated and be in positive environments that can help them be strong older people. One way to get quality is to require degrees. You require bachelor's degree in early childhood, master's degree in early childhood. That's what the star rating system is based on. But there can be other ways of getting that quality, and maybe it's certificate programs, and maybe it's good internship programs, and maybe it's helping parents who are going to come together and create kind of a co-op model to get some training on how to do that well and how to create good environments for their kids.
We can take an example of this, and it was, so my kids went through, we did different layers of preschool, and the kid number 3 was at Crystal Lake in GSRP funding in the Head Start program. And it was starting, but they didn't have the head teacher yet. And I remember going in and having the pre-registration meeting, and the assistant teacher was phenomenal, brilliant, excellent with my kid. I'd hire in a second to be a nanny. But she couldn't be the head teacher because she was still working on her degree. And it's I know that it takes education, but again, there has to be that forgiveness. She'd be stellar. So she didn't lead the class. She was the assistant teacher kind of covering until they hired the head teacher. And the head teacher was great, but I felt like she was subpar to the assistant teacher, And then I kind of lost touch with her, but we became friends. And that assistant teacher, from what I know right now, I don't think she's teaching, because I feel like she probably lost her, there was no incentive to keep going. It was kind of a grueling process, and kind of fell apart. And I think that, if I remember right, I feel like the classroom kind of fell apart for the next couple of years until you can find that you've got people with the heart that don't have the ability to go through the degree process. And then you have people that go through the degree process, but they kind of lack the nurturing quality you want for your preschool. It's
And the state does like ESRP, you have 2 years, like you can have a teacher in training, they have 2 years to get their degree. And there are I can't even think of that state program that reimburses for, like, the employer pays part of it, state pays part of it, and the teacher pays part of it.
I could look it up.
Yeah. So there are programs for education, but it's like, why do all that work and I might make 50 cents more than I'm making as an assistant teacher?
right.
Like, nobody goes to early childhood to get rich, right?
Right.
You just want to be, if you do it, you love it, it seems like the work, but you don't want it to be so painful.
I'm just thinking, like, if there's, sometimes we like aim for the top solution, which is really hard, but, you know, unfortunately, it's a money exchange. There's like, the workers need to get paid more, the parents need to pay more, like, it comes to this flux, but again, with that lower level, like, small step hodgepodge care, like, if parents can find connections like that, you can work part-time. You know, and if they're working part-time, then they don't have to pay as much for their childcare. So it's like, maybe, you know, if you had some quality part-time staff that maybe didn't need to make as much money, but could have a flexible schedule, you know, it's like, so maybe the solution is actually a little bit more, you know, quality.
So let me just say, and I'm just being devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Okay, good, we'll hire these part-time people. Now I gotta get them fingerprinted, I gotta have background check.
And
There
Laura wants to see a lead teacher in the classroom 5 days a week.
And so there are the rules, you know, and again, maybe there's good reason for them, but I don't see it. But, you know, just. So center, you got 4 infants sleeping over here. You got your 1 person here. There's a dust up in toddlers. They're sleeping. I run over. I am now in violation. Because I went over to help with the dust up. And these kids are sleeping. Can I have a monitor? No. I mean, why not? Because the child may have an issue. And they might. But that's what I'm talking about here. And I'm not saying I'm right, but where's the middle ground? Because nobody, so one of the problems I see, and this is just Jack's opinion, is part of the problem with the state schools are what I refer to as the bad actor rule. Kimmy, you did something at your center that's bad. Instead of just punishing you, they changed the rules for everybody else. So now I have to now do this because you did that. Why not just punish you? But that's not how government works. You know what I mean? That's how government works because they're all CYA. Covering your butt.
Right.
Because nobody wants to get in trouble.
Right, you want to talk again, right. But I feel like that what's happening is, and we've already pointed it out, is that, you know, some parents are able to piecemeal together something, probably like what I was blessed with some good friends, and it wasn't always perfect, but, and it was somewhat stressful sometimes, but instead, you know, so some people without that are, I know somebody in particular who's grand age, watching kids, doesn't have support, doesn't have a lot of education. I don't think those kids are getting great care, but it's what parents are paying. They can pay under the table, they can afford it, they can have a part-time schedule and get their kids in. And I'm saying, like, what if we can find those parents, help them connect with each other, or get the grandma some training that maybe she's not licensed, but maybe at least she knows, like, not to feed the baby cheese puffs for a snack, you know, it's like.
So I think if you were to try to do that, Apple would develop a Twitch.
Yeah.
You know, anybody who works with the system knows the system can be a major league pain in the neck. It's all there for good reason. But, so I guess that's where we're at right now, and that's where I'm at. how do we use common sense combined with regulation and how do we move forward? Because childcare from the center base to the in-home is basically dead in the state of Michigan. In-home childcare is pretty much gone. And how do we bring it back? We got to start somewhere, and I'm hoping that these 8 bills with the COVID money can get us going. And then once we have some people back in the game and we've got things, maybe now other things will open up and become more available. But right now, I think the goal is just get it back, the heartbeat again. Because right now the heart's not beating.
I think it's a lot of what you've already said, that people that go into the in-home game are usually only in it for a few years. And the cost behind getting your facility or your house up to code is so expensive that if they do it, they end up doing what you're saying. They do it on the side and they don't tell anybody what's going on. Which is unfortunate because they could take more kids, but they don't want that word to get out. So they're only doing with their close friends. And it's also hard too, I think, in the preschool years, that a lot of those teachers that do go on and get their degree, because they have to have an actual teaching degree to do it, will move on into school. So it's a stepping stone. So we always have constant turnover in those early, childhood years, which are so important. But there's so much training, there's so much cost, there's so much onboarding that it's really unfortunate that you can't sustain that. You really don't. If you get a preschool teacher that can last more than 2 years, congratulations, because they just don't stay.
The thing that resonated with me was the cost. Our kids are older now, it's been a long time since we had to pay for daycare. So the economics of it, especially in this region, is, as an employer, I'm just doing the math. It's like, okay, if I'm paying my people, which I am, $16, $17, $18 an hour, if they're paying $50 a day, that's, after tax. So even if they're working, 8-hour days, even at, $18 an hour, there's those decisions that are being made, like, is it really worth it?
And then they've got housing on top of it.
Yeah, so it's like, and there's a certain point where there's a kind of diminishing return if we continue to, I want to be, but there's a point where your business model won't exist if you have to continue to charge, the consumer. So I guess where I'm going on this is probably more of a federal thing, maybe we should state, and something like this, it's very helpful, but also the unemployment benefit, maybe there's an employment benefit where people that want to get into the workforce that would give them a slight bump, for that too. So it's kind of the same model, but it's kind of flipping the script there, and we give somebody a little leg up to help them to afford the childcare and come back to the workforce, because everybody's struggling. And I just hate to see our restaurants, our businesses that are closed 2 and 3 days a week. It's just it's hard to make it, without staff. So,
When there's somebody who wants to work, just can't make it.
It just doesn't make sense. And I get it. Like, I would make those same decisions. Like, yeah, it doesn't make sense to.
We made that increase in order to
Yeah, you bet. Yeah.
raise our wages.
No, it's not an option. You have to. You
Right,
have to. Yeah, there's no, it's just, where does it?
Yeah.
So, very interesting.
People are absolutely making those choices. We decided to not own a home and instead send our kids to childcare so that I could continue to work because I have a graduate degree, my career is important. But for other families, they're not that lucky. We had help with housing. That's the only reason we were able to do that. So, the cost of childcare for 2 little kids is expensive. Even as somebody who makes a decent wage, I couldn't afford childcare and a mortgage or rent.
So this discussion here is another thought. I probably take that on the off ramp, I'm headed up a different road, but Michigan is aging. Our youth workforce is diminishing. And now we're also saying to people, is it worth having a kid because I can't afford the daycare? So we're like, shooting ourselves in the foot. Somehow we've got to kind of reverse that trend, because I thought about that because I get the question all the time, what's where's the workforce? You know, part of it's the $300, part of it's COVID, part of it's whatever. But part of it is there's just not that many of them around anymore, not like it was 10 years ago, because we're aging. But I'm not. So, I mean, those are all issues that all play into the other. What do we do? How do we reverse that? I was just the Upper Peninsula. And then I was reading the census numbers, you know, that they're losing 4 and 5% population losses in counties. You know, the UP was about 300,000 people. I don't know what it is now, but you know, what do you do up there? It's an interesting.
I think once we get over that, you're thinking about you.
Yeah, they're stubborn. It might take a little longer.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's
Well, I think you hit it right. I mean, I'm Stacy from the Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance, working with our regional partners with the chambers. And talent attraction is obviously one of ours, so watch out for employers, but housing and childcare. That is, I mean, just even in Manistee County, recruited a couple, like the city manager. I mean, he's gonna have a child, trying to find housing, and it's like, you gotta call, here's a couple people you gotta call right away. Because we're losing a center that's been kind of our largest day or childcare center in a community that there's gonna displace a lot of children right now. And listening to our hospital, and there's gonna be nurses that just don't come back to work. We're already extremely, workforce shortage, and everyone is. It's just, it's mind boggling and intense in the community because people don't know what to do. I have a staff right now, it's like, what do we do? We'll set up a little center in the office, like, I mean, we've got to get creative on some of that. But I think with a lot of our workforce aging out and talent attraction, we have to solve some of these housing and childcare issues. Otherwise, we are gonna keep leading people to other areas.
well, the oddity of that is we're not leading people. We're gaining people. Each one of the counties in the 101st has increased population from the last census. The problem is they're all 60 plus. I guess my point is, and this is one of the things, and I left that off ramp and gone on to another, the whole short-term rental issue that we're dealing with. My take on it is, we're going to become victims of our own success. And I'm speaking of 101st. And you know, we've got to do something to make sure that people have a place to live. And one of the issues that again, in my term limited life here, I'll probably never get to see the end, but something that this district needs tremendously is regional transportation. So that maybe they can live in Thompsonville or Goldfish and work in Manistee or Traverse City, but we don't have the transportation issues of the car breaking down or whatever. Benzie bus or Beta can get them there. But we've got to somehow work that regional transportation. But that's a whole nother set of rules and regulations that somehow we've got to be able to fight through. So this district has some real interesting challenges because we are so successful. Everybody wants to move here. You know?
My husband was working for Benzie Bus when they increased the trips to Traverse City, thinking that people would use it for, rather than having their own car, they would ride the bus trip. So they increased that program, but they increased the stops. The few people that were regulars taking the bus to Traverse and back for work ended up quitting doing that because now they had to add another 20-30 minutes onto that whole process because they had made so many stops. And so the whole program, my understanding, this is a couple of years ago, but the whole program just, did a belly flop because it wasn't convenient. It wasn't really serving the people that had been using it, and it didn't serve the people that they were hoping to attract to it. So it's so frustrating, it seems like so many things were going in circles now.
Okay, I'm just jumping in again to my, let's get more people in the workforce, and this is totally random, but going to that childcare class was appealing because you're getting training, it was free, it was air conditioning, and I was super pregnant, so it sounded good to me at the time. But, what I ended up doing instead, I went back to school, but I also started a paper check days because it was easy. It was low cost startup kit. I had a mentor that could kind of give me information. What if we could kind of brand or package something like that to these like young moms or new retirees that would be great at nurturing a few kids? Maybe they don't need a whole like full-time income, but a few kids, if it wasn't like busting their butt and going back to school and slave driving, just having a few kids in their house every day. If you gave them like a starter package, here's your starter package, your training, your liaison, some equipment, like the fire extinguishers and like 10 of the things from the licensing you're gonna need. You can work from home, it's gonna be great, flexible, and we're gonna also refer families to you, we're gonna put you on this list and make it easy, or.
I mean, you're an idea person. You're like, here's. So
She's throwing at the wall,
let's make this happen. So I mean, because I think ultimately, I mean, you know, even at this for 3 years, you've been beaten up over it. You've got 8 bills, which are well thought out, and vetted, and you know, but they're not gonna fundamentally change the system. So some of this is, you know, about communities trying to get creative. And one of the things that I found so encouraging about this Childcare program is, yeah, there's some businesses that are ready to step up because they want to be employers of choice, or they are just so, they're desperate, or for whatever reason, they want to do that program. And there are at least 3 or 4 times as many businesses that have said, we are willing to do something. We're willing to help. You know, we're willing to help with space, we're willing to help with support for people, we're willing to help with money, but maybe not a third of the cost of childcare. And so that's really encouraging about how creative solutions at the community level can maybe help around the edges of, you know, making some changes.
And that's where some of the regulation has to get out of the way. Because it might not fit the perfect regulatory scenario, but it's smart, it's safe, it's getting people, I don't disagree with it. But we go back to my earlier when I said, Ken Sickema asked, is regulation really a problem? It's a huge problem. And so it's not saying get rid of regulation.
Right.
I'm not here talking about free falls, but you're right, we do need to loosen things up a little bit. Because kids can be watched safely and taken care of and educated or properly cared for. You just don't need the long arm of the government over on everything. But we also have the feds out of the way in some of this stuff.
You know, one thing we haven't talked about, and as an HR manager, I have given some thought to, you know, childcare is $50 a day. I feel really at risk losing the employees that are willing to come to work for us to the ability to work at home. You know, my kids are 4 and 7, and 4 and 7, you know, if I'm in the house, they might be okay. So I might quit going to work somewhere like Steve's place or my place, and I'm just gonna stay home with those kids and take a job. I mean, it can be a job anywhere, right? Because I'm working from home. I feel very, I guess, nervous about the impact of what working from home has opened for people, and it's great and it helps them balance. But I think it puts the places that are the restaurants and the hotels and hospitality, you know, I question if people are coming back to us. Or if they now have adjusted to this work from home and it's saving $50 a day per kid. Are they coming back?
I was happy to go back, but I didn't. I did remote kindergarten and remote preschool and work from home at the beginning, and I was very excited when essential childcare opened up, because I am not a teacher.
That was my thought too, Jess, but you know, if I didn't have childcare. And you know, the economics of it were such that I couldn't afford it. I'm really nervous about the people that have made that switch, that they're never coming back.
Yeah, and I wonder too about the work from home. I think that it has some merit, but not for everybody, and it'll be interesting to see how companies are already starting to say, no, we want you back in the office. And the other thing, and you know, that casting shade on anybody, but most of those active work, or stay-at-home people, work from home, they're at this echelon and pay scale.
Yes.
We're talking about, in general, that entry in the workforce, that young family, who might not have that same benefit. People up and down the scale.
Sure. Yes, for sure.
You know, and again, I talk about, hospitality, and I've used Beulah. I said, you've got somebody, a young single mom or a young family, and they gotta work in Traverse, they gotta work somewhere else. How do they get there? And even if they take the child to Traverse and drop them off at a daycare, you need that in-home, in rural right now. Somehow we gotta get it back at an affordable rate.
I know you haven't mentioned infrastructure, but that, I don't know if there's gonna be talk about that natural gas pipeline, that's a big one, obviously. Crystal Mountain wanted to build low-income housing units, but they need a natural gas pipeline up there. And what I'm noticing about Benzie County in general is that the lack of infrastructure impacts in a lot of ways. We saw that with internet, which, you knew about that, and, but we're seeing that now just with natural gas and lack of services that are convenient in Manistee or in Traverse City that, you can't grow low-income housing here.
So, a couple of thoughts on that. I'm going to tour the pipeline redo here as soon as I'm done here, which if anybody's seen all the big digging on 31, that's DTE's upgrading the gas line. So, interesting to think about it. Many of us live where we live because propane allowed us to. Michigan is one of the largest propane using states. Half those people in UP wouldn't live there if it wasn't for propane. Right? So there was a bill introduced earlier. This just to give you a feel of how things work. There was a bill introduced in the legislature in the first 6 months that basically was going to give some money and incentives so people could upgrade to natural gas. Propane industry didn't like it. And there was, whoa, how many people in your communities work for propane? So now State Representative Jack O'Malley, I want to help because Crystal Mountain could use natural gas. Yeah, but you're killing my business and I employ 50 people. But son of a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, folks, what seems like a good idea to you on one thing is a terrible idea for somebody else.
Yeah, well, I thought if we go increase in-home care, and then we've got two parts of the industry, all needs to kind of raise up together.
I think the need is great.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why I think from a childcare perspective, Bridget's Association is going to bridge. Because there will be somebody who can speak for everybody.
Well, I'm thinking about that and just connecting the dots, like you were saying, you might open up a room and have some care for your staff in your office, what if it comes from that, so businesses want to step up and want to provide care. What if they hire somebody to have an in-home care and provide it that way, saves them money, gives somebody a job, gives their employees.
So
That's
businesses,
not in a home, that's not in-home care.
a lot of
They need a
businesses,
licensed program director to run the program.
a lot of businesses have looked at starting at center, but the regulations have them go around. And if, like you say, now if I'm paying for somebody to run an in-home or something, now that's just basically, Stacy saying bring a kid to work and we'll watch him here.
Yeah, we're just.
Again,
Right, yeah, no, I get that.
the regulations. Now, years ago, when I started, the woman I worked with had a child, and Justin grew up at the radio station. He was there every morning, and she had to be in at 5:30 or whatever it was, and he was there, and I mean, he doing that little scooter his up and down the hallway. I mean, he grew up there, so business has been doing that forever.
Yeah.
So.
Well, wouldn't it be cool if you could hire a company nanny, the kids are at work, everybody's happy, the nanny's getting well paid.
There may be some, Laura, loopholes, because Crystal Mountain has childcare that's not licensed, but they sign a waiver and parents are on site.
Right.
So if an employer maybe fired somebody and they have a waiver and the parents didn't leave without child.
There is an employer, I can't remember who it is, but through the Human Resources Association, they shared some information about that. It's limited to just their kids, unlicensed.
The other place,
Boeing does
the
that
other
too.
place that does it is Traverse City, long-term care.
Oh, the pavilions,
They're unlicensed and they provide childcare.
Even like thinking about those nurses that aren't going back to work, like somebody started a little like parent co-op, okay, I'm not gonna work on Mondays, I'll watch your kids and your kids. You don't work on Tuesdays, so take our kids to your house. And then everybody gets to work, some doesn't have to pay for child.
Can we send Kimmy to Lansing?
I just annoy everybody, like, well, what about this?
Well, you got that flower.
So you
Yeah.
get frustrated.
She needs to tank. We'll send Kimmy to go run
I mean,
laps.
the thing is like we've all been saying, it's happening anyways, it's just not necessarily happening as good as it could, and people who could really benefit from some network like that aren't thinking outside the box. I feel like I can see cognition like being a place to have a lot of young parents here who have preschool kids, especially in the winter, that's like the majority of who's coming in. We have a lot of involved parents that come in the summer that are trying to figure these things out for themselves. If we had some enticing, like, hey, we're gonna have a class on Wednesdays and help, you could be an answer to this problem. Maybe you could have 4 kids at your house. I don't know, I just see like, we could be a point to convey this to the community, like once we have some ideas.
You would be a hub in information.
Yeah. I'm willing, just come up with the perfect solution, Jack, come on.
And I just have to say, I'm so glad to leave these things in capable hands. Overall, this has been fairly depressing. Jack mentioned the short-term rentals. My husband and I invested in one because that's how we're affording to not live in poverty after 2 careers and, waiting for the retirement that we do have to kick in. And my son is one of the people that can't find a home, but he found us a great short-term rental, so, it's all just such a, I wish there were some really solid answers that could happen quickly. So.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the only good thing is that there's an understanding that there's a problem. And it's, in the schools and in businesses and in the legislature and in families and, there's a lot of common ground here, but it's about kind of getting some things moving in the right direction.
And I would agree. I think right now we're in our darkest hour. We're on an upswing. And as we move forward, these 8 bills are not the end. There is much more that needs to come. Hopefully we can get the agencies and everybody to understand where we're at. And that sort of thing. And for regionally, which housing, we're gonna have to make some decisions. Because again, we're aging, this district specifically, and how much is, where are we at, and how do we do this, and where do we go, and what's transportation look like? I've referred to the 101st as the fighting 101, because if you think about it, and redistricting may change it, but these are 4 counties right along the coastline. And we have, on one hand, we have so much in common, but yet on another, Leelanau and Mason County, they both have agriculture, that's about it. It's different kind of agriculture, but yet, people from Ludington want to get to Traverse City, and tourists from Traverse City want to get to Ludington. We need to incorporate so much more of what we're doing. It's gonna take time, but I'm an optimist. I think we can get it done. So don't be depressed.
Thankful, I am thankful for optimism.
I think we've really seen that during the pandemic too. The creative people that have done some phenomenal things. I see, Benzie Bus. They did incredible to support the community and all of us in this room has really stepped up and had to be creative because it's the only way to survive.
I want to thank everyone for coming today. Yeah, I think we had a great discussion. Thank you, Jack, for coming out, Woody, Tiffany, for sharing all of your wealth of knowledge on this topic. Thank you, Cognition, for hosting in our beautiful venue and all the little critters out there. And not present with us today, the Cherry Hut, for providing your lovely lunch today. And so feel free to commune amongst yourselves, or if you've got somewhere to be. Yeah, thank you again.
Well, thank you.
Hi, how are you doing?